Україно, рідна земля мати. Господь, Отець наш Небесний, благословіть.
A Russian military transport plane carrying 74 people, including 65 prisoners of war, crashed near the Ukrainian border in Russia's Belgorod region. The Speaker of the Russian parliament accused Kiev of shooting down the plane. Another lawmaker claimed that 3 Ukrainian missiles were fired at the plane. Unverified visuals that have emerged show the plane crashing from a distance. Investigators and emergency workers are on the scene. The local governor of the region said an unspecified incident had occurred northeast of Belgorod city. He said he will inspect the site. The crashed military transport aircraft is designed to airlift troops, cargo, military equipment and weapons. Russia is claiming that no passengers have survived the crash. Belgorod is an important Russian territory which borders Ukraine. It has come under frequent attacks from Ukraine in recent months as a part of Kiev's offensive against Moscow. This includes a missile strike in the month of December last year, which killed 25 people. The prisoner exchange was supposed to be the 50th exchange since the start of the war. Up until now, over 2,800 prisoners have returned back to Ukraine. Glenn Diesen is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. Is now joining us live to talk more about this latest incident. Professor, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to WION Wild is One. The Russian State Duma Defense Committee head says that any talk of prisoner exchanges is now off the table and the blame game and the counter accusations have now started. Are these telltale signs of what's to come as the investigations into this crash are complete?
Well, I think so. And again, this is something that both sides would benefit from, this prisoner exchanges. So it's, quite unfortunately that this, of course, this event took place. So it's unclear the direction it will take. Again, so far, most of it simply rumors. The Russian government made it clear they don't really know what has happened. I'm aware that some Russian lawmakers have accused Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian media announced that Ukraine claimed responsibility for it. But once it was revealed that that transportation plane was transporting 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war, they then dropped the claim and the media reports were altered. So it's again, nobody wants to take the blame for what has happened. But if it turns out to be a Ukrainian missile which shot down the plane and also then disrupted the prisoner of war exchange, of course this will have consequences on the future arrangements.
Professor, the Russian government is saying that there are no survivors of this crash. If the investigations are over and that is established, what will be the repercussions of that going forward?
Well, based on the video evidence I've seen from the crash and the explosion, it seems unlikely that anyone would have survived this crash. In terms of consequences, I think this could be seen as an escalation. Again, it also depends what missiles, if it was a Ukrainian missile, what kind of missile was used. Again, from the Russian lawmaker, they suggest it was a Western missile belonging to NATO, which was applied to Ukraine. And again, the Russians have been quite angry about this in the past. As you mentioned before, the Ukrainians used American cluster ammunition to deliberately target civilians in Belgorod, so killing Russian civilians with American weapons. So if this turns out to be another NATO weapon used to strike within Russian territory, also disrupting the prisoner exchange, then of course it could have huge consequences, but it's unclear how the Russians would react.
Professor, I'm just curious, will the crash have any sort of impact on the war, at least on the Russian side?
Well, because of these strikes against Belgorod, which is in the across the border from Ukraine's Kharkiv, there's growing rumors that the Russians have been, well, that they're fed up with the attacks within their borders, so that they might set up a buffer zone. So based on the artillery preparations we've seen and troop movements over the past few weeks, it is quite possible that this will motivate them to actually open up another front in Kharkov. However, in my opinion, I think they're already moving in this direction, but this could be seen as another reason for doing so from the Russian side.
All right, I've been talking to Professor Glenn Deason. Thank you very much for all your insights and for talking to us today.
We begin with some breaking news, and a Russian military transport plane has crashed in the Belgorod region in the south of the country, close to the border with Ukraine. A video which was posted on social media appears to show the moment of the incident. Russian media quotes the Ministry of Defense saying that more than 70 people were on board, including 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war. And there is that video. Again, the video coming in on Telegram. We obviously cannot independently verify it, but we are showing it to you here on DW News, and we will have the very latest on this incident as it becomes available. Let's get more from DW correspondent Nick Connolly, who is live for us in Kiev. So what is the latest, Nick?
So as you mentioned there, the Russian side claiming that these were Ukrainian prisoners of war on board this plane who were going to be exchanged for Russian prisoners held by Ukraine. That's something that sources here in Kiev have denied, or at least not commented on, instead suggesting that there were missiles on board this military transport plane, missiles of the S-300 type that are routinely used by Russia to attack Kharkiv, Ukraine's second biggest city, which is very close to where this plane came down. The crash site seems to have been about 50 kilometers direct airline from the Ukrainian border, and we've had sources in Russia, people in parliament even claiming that these were Western weapons, either Iris-T or Patriot missile systems used to knock down that plane. If that were to be true, that would be an interesting development, because obviously so far Western countries, when handing over weapons to Ukraine, have always made the proviso that they can only be used on Ukrainian territory, not on Russia, against Russia on Russian territory. But again, this is a very early phase of this kind of news cycle. Lots of very contradictory sources coming out right now. So basically, all we know at the moment that it seems like this plane has come down, and it happened pretty close to towns. So there's a lot of imagery, a lot of pictures out on social media.
Yeah, and of course, you know, so many questions being raised, and a lot of speculation, as you've highlighted there. If it is indeed the case that a Ukrainian strike on this plane is what it brought it down over Russian territory, can you just give us a sense of how that might change the game in this war?
I think it's really important to focus here at the situation in the air, but also at sea. In the past few months, we haven't seen much in the way of movement on land. The Ukrainian counteroffensive didn't bring the results that were hoped for here in Kiev. Similarly, Russia's attacks in the east have barely made progress. But we really have seen, though, Ukraine being able to push Russia's ships away from Odessa and the Black Sea coast. We've seen much less in the way of activity from missile ships out in the Black Sea that were attacking cities like Odessa and the rest of the country because of those Ukrainian sea drones and other kind of unmanned tech used to attack Crimea and Russia's infrastructure there. And if it is possible now that after knocking out that Russian radar plane that we had a couple of weeks ago, that they're now attacking these kinds of transport planes, that makes Russia's military logistics a lot harder and could actually have an impact, make it easier for Ukraine to defend its cities from these missile attacks that we've been seeing in the recent months and that have been pretty intense, especially since the beginning of this year.
Nick Connolly in Kyiv, thank you.
Well, I'm going to bring in our chief foreign editor, Robert Parsons. Now, Rob Gulliver there was just talking about the credibility of this prisoner exchange. What about the credibility of the report, what the Russians are saying, that the Ukrainians shot down the plane?
Well, it's credible in the sense that the Ukrainians have the capability to do it. No doubt about that at all. And it didn't happen very far from the Ukrainian border. We know that the Ukrainians have regularly been attacking the city of Belgorod, which is very near where this incident happened. So do the Ukrainians have the military ability to carry out attacks like this? Certainly they do. Would they have done it? Not if they'd known. I would say that there were POWs on board. Were the POWs on board? I think, as Gulliver was just saying now, there is absolutely no way of knowing at the moment. Were there S-300 missiles on board, as the Ukrainians are claiming? We have no way of knowing. But when it comes to the capability, I don't think there can be any question that the Ukrainians could have done it, given the fact that it happened so close to the border with Ukraine.
Rob, here we are coming up on 2 years of this war between Russia and Ukraine. Where do things stand militarily at the moment?
Well, I mean, it's just one other thing I would say before I'll answer that question, which just a thought on what's going on with this particular incident at the moment. The Ukrainians are frustrated. They have been under constant attack by the Russians on their territory for 2 years now, without having real capability to strike back, thus far at least, into Russia, although there has been an increase in the ability of the Ukrainians to strike deeper and deeper into Russia, as we've seen over the last few months using drones. Just 24 hours ago, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was furious about the attacks on Tuesday right across Ukraine, in which 18 people were killed, including a young child, many private apartments destroyed. And he said then, the Russian war will inevitably be brought back home, back to where this evil came from. So there's no doubt that the Ukrainians have the desire to strike back into Russia. I'm not saying this means that they struck this plane down, but they certainly have the desire to do that. And that's why they're asking in part for the missiles that they've been asking for from the Germans, amongst others. They're trying to persuade the Germans to give them Taurus missiles, cruise missiles, which will allow them to strike deeper into Russia, incidentally. And it's one of the reasons why the Germans are reluctant to give them. But on the wider question you're asking about where the war is going at the moment, it's pretty much stalemate along that 1,600-kilometre front. There is a little bit of movement here and there. The Russians do seem to have the initiative at the moment. But when advancing 600 meters over a couple of weeks becomes a source of boasting, it tells you just how locked into their positions the two sides are. Very little progress being made. The big concern for the Ukrainians, however, is that if they don't get sufficient weaponry, if they don't get sufficient ammunition to fight back against the Russians, things could turn.